I've been working with my teacher for several years doing Dharma transmission in our lineage, which is the Maezumi-roshi lineage. A lot of the teachers are grouped as the White Plum Asanga. We have, when one begins Dharma transmission with a teacher, they do a ceremony to become a Dharma holder. And then one has multi-years of training. Part of the ideal progression would be for one to complete formal koan study, which I did with my teacher. And then there's a whole process in Dharma transmission. We work with a lot of sort of what we might call the advanced material, things like the five ranks of Zen and the five Buddha families and some others. And then we work with the precepts. There's about 200 precept koans we work. And with my teacher, we really worked that quite extensively. Both of us wanted to do that. And then when that's complete, then you do the ceremony where you become a sensei, a teacher. So at that point, you're an independent teacher in our lineage. And then at some point later, when your teacher feels that they can see you as a teacher, they can see your as closely as you can, presenting the authentic Dharma, supporting students, guiding them on the path of awakening. Then there's a ceremony called Inka Shomei, which is the final seal, the final Dharma seal. One of the sort of, I guess, more esoteric aspects of Dharma transmission is what we call the mind-to-mind transmission, where there's a kind of intuitive, energetic, psychic communication. Like I've told the story when I first, my teacher and I first got in contact, he wrote me about one of my books, Buddha's Heart, wanting to learn the practices. And so when we got on Zoom, it was just clear to both of us immediately that there was this open channel. And it was something neither of us had experienced before. So our comment was, hey, this must be that mind-to-mind transmission business that we've read about for decades. So that was part of it. What led to us doing transmission was there was just this clear channel and whatnot. So I'm giving you sort of a long answer, but that's sort of the progression. And then with the Inka Shomei, then my title changes from sensei, means teacher, to Roshi, which usually means Zen master. And I was reflecting on this. I had a little notice of this was going to happen. Normally the teachers don't tell you. It's sort of a spontaneous ceremony. And just reflecting on it, I just was thinking about it, and I thought, boy, when I was a young student, I started this when I was 19, and now 50 years later, I would have thought I was pretty cool, and I would have really gotten into the grandiosity. And I was telling some of my students recently that what I found sitting with all this was a lot more arising of really a kind of sacredness, and the strongest sort of impact has been humility, really seeing that this is a great charge also to try to hold the Dharma as cleanly as possible and to support students in their path of awakening. So long answer to short question.
No, no, it was a wonderful answer, and thank you for sharing it. And just to go back to that humility that you were sharing, on your website, there's a small letter that you have that's available for people to read from August 25th, saying 2025, where you talk about to paraphrase, like the specialness of the occasion, but also there is this graveness with assuming this role. There's like a weight to becoming to receiving this Roshi title, but also to carry the lineage in this way, and to now meet this moment with your teacher. So there's like thank you for kind of offering a little bit more and fleshing that out, because it's a very special occasion, and also you're not taking it lightly in a way, and which is really special. And you spoke to this somewhat, but did some of this feel um heady in any way? Did it feel kind of like there was some kind of like, okay, now I'm reaching these milestones in an intellectual kind of programmatic kind of sense, or did it feel like there was something more experiential with receiving this participating in this ceremony?
Yeah, I think it's more visceral. And interestingly, the way it worked out with my teacher and I was probably for the last few weeks, we've been having very regular phone conversations and just talking about practice and life and aging and all these different issues. And but very, very casual conversations, and yet kind of floating in and out of the Dharma and teaching and all that. And I could really see the intimacy and just the simplicity of the meetings. We just kept meeting in a way that was really, um, I don't know, had a real ease to it. And I think part of it too, the timing of this, I'm going to start with some of my students doing Dharma transmission in 2027. So I'll do their first ceremony of become Dharma holders next year sometime, and then we'll start their training in 27. So I think that was all sort of part of the mix of this, of commencing and starting to train additional teachers. And I have probably about close to 20 Buddhist heart teachers, people who have been trained in the heart practices to teach those. But these folks will train as Zen teachers. So this will be, um, the much longer. And I expect with me, it'll probably be at least 7 years of training um, in Dharma transmission is my hunch.
Yeah. And I want to get into some components of that, but just on a relationship sense, now that you have been recognized by your teacher as a teacher, and there's this shared Dharma I component, um, not to put labels on everything, but like, does it feel like there's like a colleagueship that happens now, where you feel a little bit less like there isn't much of a established hierarchy with teacher and student relationship, or do you will you always have that kind of I don't know if affection is the right word, but
Mhm.
feeling of gratitude towards somebody else as being that leader for you in this part of your Buddhist journey?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I'll say this, the Dharma transmission period was among the richest time of my practice life. I've been practicing 50 years now. And it was just, it sort of synthesized everything that I had done in some way. All of it came into play and fit. And so it really was an interesting process for that. I think for me, even though my teacher and I are peers in every way, um, he's still my teacher in some respects. So I'll always like, should he come to teach in person at a retreat I'm offering, I mean, he would definitely have a special seat and be very set up, yeah, because the respect and the gratitude really stay, and the fact that he gave me this great gift, allowing me to really be an open channel for the absolute and guiding students, was a tremendous gift, and I'm ever so grateful.
Sure. And now that you're kind of going to be, I don't know if you've given Dharma transition before, but you're
Mm-mm.
you're you're gearing up for that now, like within the next year, to kind of start establishing and getting that ball rolling and getting people trained to then be able to be vessels to receive that. Uh, what has that been like for you? You're coming from when you were starting at 19 years old. Now you are giving this transmission. You're going to be offering it to students of yours, and does that have an emotional impact on you, or does it kind of does it feel like similar to how you had received that Inca Shomei, where you are participating in something very sacred and you just feel there's maybe a graveness and a weight to it?
I think all the above, that there's definitely a seriousness. It's been interesting, even the process of selecting folks. There's just a lot that goes into it. And in the lineage I've established, which is called Awakening Dharma, that's the website, and the nonprofit name. But in just sort of establishing and getting ready to have folks go into Dharma transmission, there's definitely a seriousness to it. And looking at people, I really want to keep the old style of transmission where the people I select are people who have had multiple deep awakenings. And ideally have finished completed formal koan study. The folks that I've invited are all in formal koan study. They have had several deep awakenings, so they're quite awake, as we would frame it, and they'll fit. Ideally, they'll complete formal koan study in the process of transmission, and then do the transmission work as well. So that's the ideal, that I'd like, because then in our lineage we have both the Soto and the Rinzai transmission. So I'd like to be able to give that full transmission, but that requires people to finish formal koan study, which we've got about 600 koans in our lineage. So it's a pretty husky piece of work to
Certainly.
do.
And when it comes to just because I want to get into awakening with you, and I do want to also just mention that you have a really uh, robust and helpful resource in your YouTube channel where you discuss a lot of these concepts. So I just wanted to mention
Yeah.
that. But when it comes to your personal experience with koan, um, has there been one in particular, and I know that it's not something that is necessarily an intellectual exercise. It's something that is a more like a full being exercise.
Mhm.
Was there one that you felt particularly connected to, or you had a particular experience with that felt that you're comfortable sharing, but that was seemed like it was a not necessarily a benchmark, but just like a an important moment in your journey, more than maybe anything else.
Yeah, I think there are every koan affords a kind of a mini kensho, a little mini awakening, but some are more potent. Some of them are more potent in their construction, and some just how they impact any individual is going to be a little different, obviously. So for me, there was one, I can't sort of give you the whole thing verbatim, but essentially the koan is that there's a bull, and the bull is walking down this path or street, and it jumps through a screen, like on a house, like the windows in Asia, they might have sort of shoji screen like windows. So this bull jumps through the window, and the whole bull goes all the way through the window except the tail. The tail gets caught. So this is the koan that you have. And so there's really a lot here in terms of, what is the bull? What does that represent? The bull's walking and then it jumps into a house. It kind of breaks into this house. What's that about? And then most interestingly to me was, well, why does the tail get caught? You have this multi-thousand-pound bull. One would think the tail would be the least of its concerns. Uh, but it comes down to this koan is really about looking at the process of awakening, that virtually none of us have first awakenings that are completely thorough. There's always going to be sort of snags of personality, undigested bits, um, unconscious material, and that's what the tail represents. So it's for each of us to get in contact with what's our tail? What are we still working with? What is unconscious material to me? So it really became an important koan, both in sort of dismantling all that I've told you, and this is all done experientially. So this isn't conceptually at all. It's getting it, and that's how the answers have to come. They come intuitively from the absolute. I both my teacher and I, ironically, were trained and are lawyers, and that didn't help either of us in this work. We laughed about it at times because we did get into sort of some lawyering semantics, trying to decide the best word for this or that. So we had some laughs over that, but it's something that bypasses that system to work. So anyway, another long answer.
No, it's wonderful. But the visual, to speaking to that experiential element, there's something very poetic and artful about that visual, because it's a story, and as you told it, it's so clear, and there's something very um, it's a very open in imagination when it comes to like what you can perceive, and everyone probably has their own uh, way that they imagine the street in relationship to the house and the bowl, and so everyone can kind of interpret that story.
Yeah.
And there is something very powerful about that where it's hard to overanalyze because it's a moving imagination. It's like imagination that kind of maybe
Hmm.
does something as you ingest it. That's really wonderful. And so the koan work will be part of your transmission training for your students. And just to go into the awakening element, because there's as you mentioned, there's these kind of mini awakenings that can be part of leading towards some larger moments of awakening or towards some more clarity. And you have a great video that I watched on your YouTube channel. I think it might be just called like Awakening, or it has that in the title. And you describe in a pretty concise way uh, how your lineage discusses that and how it interprets that word. And I really appreciated this example that you gave, which is that there is some trepidation with people. They might not know they have trepidation, but there is trepidation with this idea that if someone to offer you, hey, if you want awakening, just say this Dharani, like this magical phrase, 3 times with an abundant sincerity, and you will become awakened. And you offer this, which I think is really important, is that like there's this initial like, oh, great, my well, I can break free of suffering. Like that sounds like such a boon. And then soon after there's something that settles in, which is this kind of, well, then what happens next? And there's this doubt and there's this like hesitation that comes with it. And it just feels like a very honest human interpretation of this opportunity, because there are many different interpretations of Buddhism, and there are many different ways of accessing the teachings and ways, I suppose, then out of suffering. But I think a lot of people like hesitate to make that leap. And I was wondering, for like for yourself, like how did you kind of how did you launch yourself into the unknown, and what kind of advice would you feel comfortable offering to people to to let go in that way?
Hmm. Well, I'll say first, in terms of teaching, I really, fortunately, I had a pretty extensive experience with the Theravadan, traditional Theravadan samatha practices, including the heart practices. And we have some very established heart practices in Theravada Buddhism, and we've been doing them for 2,600 years. The yogic tradition's been doing them longer, so they've been around for a long time. That's really the piece that I think has been missing in the Zen tradition. And this is why I feel like part of my teaching, I'm always folding in the heart practices in lots of different ways. So I think that's what helps the personality prepare for awakening. Is doing practices like one meditation I slightly innovated is called innate goodness meditation. It's simply touching into the innate goodness you can experience. Many of us witness it when we see infants, human or animal, puppies, kittens, little babies. They're just cute as can be. They're happy. They're full of life. And they're not trying to do anything. They're not trying to make you like them. They're just being. Well, that's the expression of innate goodness. So for us to contact that within ourselves and to start to rest in our own innate goodness begins to fill in some of the deficit perception we have of ourselves. And that gives us more comfort moving into newer territory. So, so that's part of it. For me, with awakening, you probably saw in the video, I look for 3 components. I look for a very deep experience of absence of self. We traditionally call it no self. So this is where I don't know who I am. Normally I might say, oh, I'm this guy and I used to be a lawyer and I went to school here and I'm married to this person or have these kids, the usual litany. And with absence of self, none of that's accessible. It's just like I literally don't know who I am. I mean, none of these markers of me are available. And so if one has that experience, then I could confirm that as an absence of self experience. But if that cascades into a unity experience, the oneness of love, everything is a part of the same oneness, including me. If that happens with the absence of self, and there's a third component, which is the recognition. Ah, this is who I am. This is the real, the true me. If all of that happens in a significant way, and I say significant way because I've had people have just flashes, just seconds where they have this, and it can be very useful for them to see the reality in their own experience. But unless the experience sustains for at least a few hours, it's not going to have much impact. And 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 the way we measure depth of awakening is really how long the sense of self is suspended. It can be, again, seconds. Typically, it's at least hours, if not days or weeks. I have a very few students. It's been months, but that's real unusual. But that does happen, which is a fairly deep awakening. But the sense of self isn't operating. So part of it is after awakening, we're getting to see, oh, I can do my life and not have a me. And in fact, it's easier. I'm not getting snagged when my partner says, take out the garbage. I don't go into resentment. You see all these different changes about you. And then when the personality begins creeping back in, of course, there's disappointment because we all thought we were done and we find we're not. But we get to see the potential. And so that really ignites our the bodhicitta, the heart of awakening, that really ignites that because we see nothing bad happened. It wasn't this, I didn't die, I didn't become a permanent couch potato with no volition. So it really brings reality into it, which is helpful.
Yeah. And I think that there's something, I suppose, maybe comforting in knowing that it can last hours, it can last weeks, and in some special occasions, that sense of like no self and that loss of self can last months. But your self does kind of creep back. And for some people, that might be saying, well, I don't want to become a couch potato or a zafu potato or whatever it is, and I don't want to like just be completely checked out of my regular experience for a long time, knowing that there is this like temporary thing that happens that can be built upon,
Right.
and so you're not fully uh, uh, beyond in any way. Um, and that said, like I was wondering if there is a conversation that you have with students that are ready for these types of experiences that you have with them with regards to their external communities, because whether they are parents or they have friends that rely on them or close to them or coworkers or whatever it is, maybe someone that goes through a week-long no self experience that might bridge out beyond the bounds of a retreat. They might they
Hmm.
might they might have that experience on the last day or something like that,
Right.
and then they re-enter the world with uh, like a changed perspective. And is there something that you help people guide? Is there something that you offer to your students? Like, should this happen to you as you re-enter the world and you're still kind of experiencing this sense of no self and things are kind of suspended in its own way, that you share, that you ask them to share with their external community before or afterwards, to say like, hey, I am experiencing something here. It doesn't mean that I don't love you anymore, child, or that we can't still play pickup basketball, Jeff, or whatever it is. I'm just curious if there's a preemptive conversation about that.
Yeah, there can be, and that does happen sometimes where folks will have an awakening, well, either off retreat, like I even had a student have an awakening on a day long, on online day long, so on Zoom. So that can happen too. It's potent. So yeah, I usually have conversations with them. What do they feel like they can share with their partner if they've got a partner or their close family? What are they comfortable? How well is the family going to receive it? Uh, can you ask them just can we be a little more open with each other for this next period of time? And I'm sort of navigating some new waters, that kind of thing. Usually people find it helpful when they go home and they realize their partner, like I mentioned, the garbage example, the triggers happen that would normally create a reaction, and there's no reaction because there's no self to get triggered. So again, the self that does creep back in, but they do have a time where they can experience the freedom, the liberation of what's potential. And this is a potential in the Zen map of awakening. The third level of awakening we call Daigo Teite, means final or full awakening, which it's not really. But the result of that awakening is the sense of self drops away permanently. So the me doesn't come back. So that is a potential, and that is, complete liberation or whatever we'd call it. But that is a potential. But yeah, there needs to be those conversations with folks. And probably the most challenging is if somebody feels like they can't share it with their partner or spouse. That's very dicey because they're not going to be getting much support at home for this, and so that can get problematic. But that's fairly rare. Usually, they're married to folks or partnered with folks who are supportive and very often do practice themselves. So there can be room for that.
The kind of understanding. Yeah, I think it's good to have some language or some kind of understanding before, or even just like to say to somebody like I do find that this practice is helpful for my life, and there are elements of myself that I'm going to be exploring and experimenting with, and so things might change, as I walk this. But
Yeah.
and so to be in a supportive community is so important. Um, and then just to go back just a little bit towards within our awakening conversation, there's a really wonderful interview with you and your student Todd Mushin Lisenby that I watched, and you mentioned that one of your earliest experiences that you remember of having some sort of uh, like a powerful moment, poignant moment was when you were 3 years old and you were in Japan and you saw a monk rushing to go do something, and you saw the robes kind of billowing along on them as they were running, and that had some sort of impact on you. I mean, like it
Hmm.
has lasted all this time, and it felt like it had this kind of connection. I just wanted to mention it because it kind of spoke to that moment in awakening, or that moment that you had with your teacher, where it's just kind of like uh, these moments where you felt kind of connected, like immediately, like right away. Uh,
Hmm.
has your life been kind of peppered with those kind of things? I mean, it sounds like they happen every once in a while. And when you get those, ha- do you have a hard time? I don't know if it's like attaching to them or not attaching to them, or like putting them in the right category without make them becoming too much for you, I suppose.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, a lot in that question.
Yeah.
Um, I think certainly I've had those moments where there was knowing and clarity that wasn't from conceptual finagling. So, just you meet people like for me in working with students, one of the things I'm looking for is there a sense of open channel and open communication with us? I was reading recently an old Zen text from Japan, and this teacher was asked, why do you think some students progress with you and some don't? Great question. And the teacher said, it all depends on karmic affinity. And I think there's a lot of truth in that. And that's how it feels. Like some folks, you're together like we are now, and there's just a sense of a knowing. Like we've done this before, in different versions. We kind of know each other in a way that we can't quite explain. There's just a kind of an intimacy, and I find those students do well with my teaching. They sort of get me, they get my style, which, and I tell people I'm very non-traditional, both the Theravadan presentation and the Zen presentation. So folks that want the traditional, there's plenty of great teachers that do that, and I'm not that. I mix and match practices based upon where it feels like people are, what they're encountering, all the while with an eye principally towards awakening. That's really sort of the bullseye for my teaching, that I really want to support folks in awakening either through Kensho, which is the Zen version, or cessation, which is the Theravadan version.
And that's something that I really appreciated in that interview with Mushin. And you were talking about how when it comes to working with students, you really do have a bespoke or like a custom approach for each student that you have. Like you have a you pull from a lot of different parts of your experience, parts of your training, parts of the different Buddhisms, and also just and we can get into this more later, but you have other modalities for awakening that are not necessarily Buddhist, not necessarily in a traditional religious sense, but you have these connections to other places that you can offer to a student, and you have to get to know the student before you kind of offer these and see what might fit them.
Right.
And what I really appreciated too is that when you have these one-on-one exchanges during a retreat, uh, the if you see the student might need to have their balloon popped when they kind of like get a little too close to something, or you're kind of nudging them into an awakening state, uh, it feels very spontaneous. And there's something really wonderful about how that is, like the spontaneity for all the training, for all the practice, for all uh the study and all these different things. Spontaneity is also incorporated into your work and to your
Mm-hmm.
practice. How do you feel about like having done so much work and been in this world for so long in this way? uh how does spontaneity feel for you? Does it still kind of does it kind of give you a thrill sometimes, or does it feel like there is something about things happening just in the moment that are uh, have like a positivity to them sometimes that you like to channel? I'm just curious, like what your relationship is with things just happening of the moment.
Yeah, yeah, and I'm gonna say let's talk about it as though there's two kinds of spontaneity. There's spontaneity based on personality. I want to be spontaneous. I want you to perceive me as spontaneous, or I want something from you, so I'm going to appear to be spontaneous. So there's that group which we're not going to talk about. And the other group is really the spontaneity that's an aliveness in the moment. And that's really what we're talking about. And fortunately, this is really a core value, a core part of the Zen world, is getting to the point where, and really doing formal koan study, part of the benefit of that is it really breaks down our self-consciousness. uh, because to really do all the koans, we have to go to a lot of different places within who we are and even outside that. So it really breaks down that contraction of self-consciousness. So the spontaneity is important, and interestingly, as you say, it's not something that can be pre-planned. Somebody may come in and they may say something in just this moment where it feels like they're offering me this balloon that's been overblown, and I've got a big pin in my hand. So it's kind of like, well, I'm going to go for the balloon. And so there'll be something that could be said, or some type of maybe even action that can cut through. It bypasses the concept. It hits in the absolute territory that they're resting in. And so it hasn't happened a lot, but probably a handful of times in interviews, somebody has sparked into Kensho from our exchange. But to say that I've also had people, one person had an awakening. They were watching my teacher give a Zoom talk in a retreat, and something he said sparked them into Kensho. So that can happen too. There can be just the right word said at the right time that even if there's not an intention on this side to necessarily know that this person is perfectly ripe, uh, it's the way it works too. That's part of the sparking, particularly of one being a Roshi. There's just a lot more of that juice that's available.
And d- all that practice and study kind of makes you available for those moments that can like prepare you, kind of provide like a necessarily like a clean slate, but just like you're primed more to hear those words
Mhm.
from a Roshi and things like that that can.
Yeah, I think so. I think so. And then also on this side, it's operating more and more in a don't know place where I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know what you're going to say. I don't know how it's going to unfold. So I don't have anything pre-planned. I'm open and I'm ready to respond. But also part of the formal koan trading too is you end up having at times sort of these what we call dharma combats with your teacher, where just there's a kind of an exchange that spontaneously happens for a period of time. And technically there are winners and losers, really there aren't. But somebody will get the last comment. And so that's part of the development and training happens too. That there's a lot of the spontaneity of recognizing sort of a dharma balloon that you happen to have the pin for. So
Yeah,
so it's all part of the mystery of it too, which is cool.
yeah, and that's what makes it. That's I think like within that spontaneity, you get that feel for the your sense of attention changes. I feel like when you
Yeah.
are participating in something very much of the moment that has its charge, that has its environment, whether it's on a retreat or elsewhere, if you're hearing something, uh, there's something kind of transcendent about uh grasping or like finding that lightning, like feeling
Yeah.
that moment.
Yeah,
And
well,
it's
it's
like,
all of it. But I mean,
yeah,
it's also feeling the field. As somebody comes in the interview room, I'm going to be sensing the field so I can feel an energy. And if they're coming in, boom, like this is what they're going to meet. Okay. I tell them part of my job is to establish what rug you're standing on and try to pull it out from under you. I had a great exchange with a student. One of my students is this really lovely guy from the Ozarks, really well-read kind of country guy. And we were talking, and he's going quite deep. And he said, talking to a Zen master is like talking to a sneaky bastard. And I said, yep, that's exactly right. And I just thought it was hysterical. I told my teacher, who also did, and I said, yeah, that is what we're doing. We're definitely pointing you this way and that way, trying to tie up the ropes.
yeah, right. And expose that tail that's dangling out of
Yeah,
the house.
right.
That's wonderful. And just to go back a little bit to your awakening experiences as you've gone your journey, because I know that when you talked about the heart practices, that being really important for you, and also your transmission or your recognition within Theravada communities, uh, in addition to your work and your practice within Zen. I was wondering, like, as it might be kind of a not really quite an answerable question, but is there a dynamic or like something that is noticeable between a awakening experience within a Zen environment with Zen teachers within a Zen setting or a Zen mindset, and when you go and you work with um, someone within the Theravadan community within a specific lineage, and you're engaging with that teacher or texts or practices, Brahmi Viharas and heart practices, is there something about that type of what you receive and are given, offered from those practices that feel a little bit different?
Yeah, I think the traditions have a different energy. Uh, the teacher I had for Theravada Buddhism was a very traditional Buddhist teacher from Myanmar and who really tried to keep the teachings and practices as close to what the Buddha did. And often that's what he would say. The Buddha did exactly this. And I tell people, I personally have no way of knowing that, but I certainly believe my teacher believes it. So that's what I'm conveying. but they're ancient practices. That's the great news about them. So I think there's these do different work, and in some ways we're working similar aspects. The heart practices, I didn't grow up with these in my early years, and it made a difference in terms of the awakenings in the Zen world in my early years. What I would say is there was a lot of emptiness awakenings. I would say there were very, very few, if any, heart and emptiness awakenings the way that I require. And I think because of that, there was a lot more harshness, there was a lot more brutality towards students. The students were also, we were wildly immature, so we idealized the teachers, and I believe my teachers to be living Buddhas. So basically, everything they did was enlightened, and if it didn't appear to that way to me, that was my deficit. So that's the way a lot of us let the teachers get away with a lot too. It was in that world. But I think there's differences. But I think with the combination, as we bring more heart practices into the Zen world, we're going to have less of the harshness. I think also it will soften some of the teachers who are finding themselves getting in trouble with students in one way or another. So I think having that heart practice to be tender to oneself will further that, will minimize that risk.
Mhm. And in your experience also does incorporate like other uh, traditions or approaches towards awakening. I think you have experience with, I believe it's the Diamond Heart uh,
Mhm.
organization, and there's work with enneagrams, which I'm not wildly familiar with, but I think it has it works with the categories of personality, and it has like a psychological component to it too. Um, I was wondering if we could just talk about your experience working with the Diamond Heart, but also too if there are, as of recent, or any other necessarily non that aren't within a strict sense Buddhist pathways into awakening that you have found pulling components of have been helpful for what you apply towards your students.
Mhm. Yeah, I think the main thing, I'll speak to the last question first. The modalities that I use that are non-Buddhist, I use the chakras a lot in meditations. I really, it sort of started because the belly, the hara chakra, is a terribly important one in the Zen world. And so a lot of teachers would teach us to hold our awareness in the hara, build, let the energy build there, etc. And in Theravada Buddhism, the wisdom eye, the third eye in the center of the forehead, called the Dharma eye in the Zen tradition, is very important. That's part of the inner sight some people have in meditation. It also seems to cultivate intuitive knowing. So things like working with koans, that's part of how we're going to resolve the koan is through this strengthening of intuitive knowing, or building that muscle through working the different koans. So that's where, and then the heart, of course, is terribly important. So once you have, three of those, then you might as well touch into a number of them. I don't do all the chakras, but I do the ones that relate to the Buddhist practices. And in terms of the diamond approach or diamond heart, yeah, it was really important work for me. I had a lot of the realizations of Buddhism, but I still had a lot of behavior that was unsophisticated, immature, um, didn't seem to be too affected by spiritual realization. And the diamond approach, the diamond heart seemed to have that. So I began working with Sandra Maitri, who's also one of the people I interviewed for the series Anatomy of Awakening, which I have. It's a video series interviewing about 8 or 9 other teachers on awakening. But anyway, I worked with Sandra, and she's probably the expert in the spiritual dimensions of the Enneagram. And the Enneagram, as you say, is sort of a personality orientation type of program. But the great thing about the Enneagram is that we can see a lot of our behavior from the Enneagram perspective, and it takes our behavior from I'm such an individual, I'm so unique, everything I do is totally different from everybody else, to realizing that 90% of what I do, all the other types in my Enneatype do. So I'm not so special, I'm not so unique, and actually that helps diffuse some of that personality clinging and such. It's an interesting process. But and then we work personal material. The way that I've introduced this with my students is I talk about the psychological. I'm not trained in psychology, but we did a lot of study and reading in the Diamond Approach, and I completed the Diamond Approach Seminary, which is 8 years where you do a lot of this also. And so I bring it in to understand how our psychology is impacted by awakening, and I've done some writing and some talks on that also. But there's ways that we can work all this material and include it. Like one of the simple things I tell folks leaving retreat is watch for your overreactions in life. Any place that you're reacting in a way that you go, wow, that was a little much. Something's getting triggered. There's something deep, an identity that's getting stepped on. So just having that as a kind of a tool really helps us begin to work our outside behavior. And that's really what I was helped by the Diamond Approach, is sort of connecting the two in terms of sense of self and being our uniqueness without being our dysfunction. So that's a nice, distinction to have. And then we can be more consistent in terms of being practitioners and particularly teachers if we're not working our personality issues with our students.
Yeah, like I really appreciate that, like, being your uniqueness and without being your dysfunction. It's like you can understand and appreciate what made you you, all the trips and the falls, and also but also the support and the love that you might get, and the everyone has their own experience with that. But being able to show up as somebody who has lived their story, but not bringing all of the the traumas and all those things unaddressed at the ready towards your situation is like really helpful, I think, for working on yourself and further developing. And I think that you had spoken with Mushin in your interview with him, just talking about how it's important to get yourself, your personality, yourself, in the sense of like who you think you are, your ego, into a place where you can then work on furthering your development within a practice sense, because you could, there's a chance that you might not be quite ready for some of the tools that are available that you share within your teachings and retreats.
Mhm.
No, that's a really wonderful way of looking at it. And two, just like when it comes to the work, like that work of facing your triggers, or facing those elements of when you look back and you look back at those moments of overreaction. uh I think there's a reason why a lot of people would rather be wrapped up in delusion, is because, like, when you really sit and feel those feelings, it's so unpleasant, or it can be, and it can
Mhm.
really be quite overwhelming. And everyone's got their own experiences. Everyone has their own thresholds for that type of experience of like, really being able to sit with that type of suffering, or sit with their triggers. Um, but just speaking broadly, how would you encourage encourage somebody, and really do mean like encourage, like give courage to somebody to really breathe and sit with those moments that they'd rather kind of maybe leave uncovered, or leave covered, and
Mhm.
leave unaddressed?
Well, the first thing I tell them is you don't have to work anything you're not ready for. So if something is coming up and you feel like it's going to be too uncomfortable, too difficult, put it down, put it on back burner, wait till you're ready. Because I talk a lot about ripeness, that both in our own development, we have to let ourselves ripen. Everybody comes on retreat, everybody wants all the goodies that retreat's going to offer. And of course, you have the famous saying on retreat, we all get the retreat we need, we rarely get the retreat we want. And that's the reality. A lot of people come in, oh, I would love to be awakened. maybe not. You know, maybe you're not quite ready. There's some developmental work that still needs to happen. So I approach it where that's what's unfolding. There's a wisdom of the absolute unfolding that I'm a part of, but I'm not the source of. And so I have to appreciate that you come on retreat and have this big awakening. This was the ripeness, for the absolute in that particular location. So part of that comes into trust, understanding people ripen in their own way, and also developmentally. From my perspective, there's no end to the depth of awakening that we can have, meaning there's always more. And conversely, the personal material, there's always going to be more dysfunction to be revealed and worked. So we keep watching for our overreactions, regardless of where we think we are on the path, because there's always going to be personal material percolating up when we're ready from the unconscious that we can then compost. And that's really the function. But the notion that's existed when I was a young student in particular, that the teachers, the Roshis in particular, were faultless and complete and fully realized, is unfortunately a myth that persists. That we're still works in progress. We've reached a point where we can be broadcasting more than we need to be receiving, but the point is we're still receiving, we're still learning. I told my teacher, I think one of the big commonalities I've seen among the Zen teachers who've gotten in trouble is none of them are working with other teachers. And so they lose being a student. Like my teacher, Sando Roshi, and I, we see ourselves first as students. We're students on the path always, and that includes teaching. So we're always trying to learn along the way. And that really invites the humility where we can be open to hear from people and to have open exchanges.
Yeah, that's thank you for offering that. And I was struck by what you were saying about how there is always a greater level of awareness that you can have, or like there can be like a greater level of awakening that you can have, like that is a depth that you can kind of continually explore. And then as you explore that, more things come up, more things come up to the surface, as far as like where you have you know those deep feelings, those wounds maybe that can show up, because I mean, after all, like generations and generations of karmic exchange and action are in there somewhere. And so to things are further revealed, and as things are further revealed, though it feels like you get a little badge for having a little bit more awakening, you also now have the responsibility of knowing a little bit more about yourself. And so you
Right. And
yeah.
working harder material.
Yeah, right,
So,
right,
if you're doing it right anyway, that's what should
right.
be happening.
Yeah, yeah. So thank you for that, because it speaks to something that we more or less began our conversation with, which is this, sure, you're assuming this role of a Roshi, or you are now in that position, and that can be a humbling experience too, because that your perception for the depth of yourself, the complex mixture of that is a heavy weight. It can be, it can be all that. Well, I've really have greatly appreciated our conversation, and I just wanted to offer two more questions that are on the shorter side, but one has to do with promotion. If there's anything that you want to get more eyes and ears on, to get people to take a look at, and just to offer some things here, the website awakeningdharma.org is where you can find more information about Awakening Dharma. And you can also offer some donations towards things like the Awakening Dharma Retreat Center. And also, you can purchase courses like the Anatomy of Awakening that go towards the development of this retreat center, and also just to support Awakening Dharma. You offer in-person meditation retreats. There's something coming up in October, Come Home, Awakening the Heart of Longing. This is based in person in Beaverton, Michigan. Mugen-roshi is also the author of books including Liberating the Self, Demystifying Awakening, and Buddha's Heart, and co-authored Practicing the Jhānas. And like we had mentioned before, you have a very active and helpful YouTube channel and an Instagram. So I know I hit a lot there, but if there's anything that I haven't discussed, please feel free to share.
Yeah, the only thing I'd say is for folks, if you're interested, I offer online day-longs, and that's a great way to sample my teaching, also meet some of the Sangha and see how that feels. And that often leads people to join. I have three mentoring groups, one that relates to more Theravadan practices, the jhanas and other practices. Another's on demystifying awakening, and then the third, starting in January, is liberating the self. And so that'd be working more of the psychological, emotional, but in relation to the heart practices, the heart qualities. So that'll be so joining a mentoring group is a great way to be engaged with an ongoing sangha and ongoing practice. And again, as you said, the in-person retreats, no matter how sophisticated we get electronically, there's still some magic that happens when we physically sit together for sustained periods of time. And the retreats I offer are either 2 or 3 weeks. So they're fairly sustained retreats, but it allows for a lot of deep impact also by having
Certainly.
that. Yeah,
Eh,
no,
eh,
otherwise, I think YouTube channel, but yeah, thanks very much for doing this. I appreciate the conversation very much.
Oh, good. Yeah, thank you. And also too, I took a quick look at Beaverton, Michigan, just like thereabouts on YouTube, and it's pretty. It has a small kind of very Americana kind of downtown, but also like there's a lot of like forests and kind of it seems like
Right.
in the area too, which I think is uh that's the type of setting it seems like it's in. And then my last question is, do you have any advice that you'd want to share with somebody who is that you wish that you had heard as you were entering the path?
Yeah, I think I would suggest people start with practices like the innate goodness practice. Really start with making contact with your goodness and really start filling in that deficit of I'm not enough, I'm not good enough. And that helps a lot. And just to know that we all have our own karmic path we're on. None of us are on the same path, identical path, but we can walk our path. And if you choose this kind of journey, you won't be disappointed, and you will meet a lot of surprises along the way. Um, so I think I'll leave it there.
Mugen Roshi, thank you so much for speaking with me today. This is such a wonderful conversation, and congratulations again on your Inca Shomei and for all the things that you'll be offering now your students with upcoming Dharma transmissions. It seems like it's a very exciting time, and I wish you the best, especially as you get into preparing for this upcoming retreat. And thank you again so much for your time.